Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Hopkins. Well, in our news today, the ongoing coverage of the Syrian war. Could they possibly be getting a break? Also, the war in Yemen still taking its deadly toll on the inhabitants. And we'll look at one analyst's view on how the U.S. is preparing for nuclear war with China and Russia. But first, a tsunami warning has been issued in Indonesia after a 7.9 magnitude earthquake struck off the western island of Sumatra. Padang, which has a population of approximately 1 million people, was closest to the epicenter of the quake. Now, people in the city said the earthquake was felt strongly, causing many to flee from their homes.
That's right. The tsunami warning covers 5 provinces on the island of Sumatra. So far, they are reporting no damage in the city of Padang and no tsunami. At the moment, there is no contact, however, with the chain of islands just off the western coast of Sumatra. Phone connections cannot be established at this time. These islands were hit in 2010 by a tsunami, which caused the death of hundreds of people.
The Sumatran people have had quite an experience dealing with earthquakes. They take place very regularly at this time. Now, many people flee for higher ground when this happens to avoid the devastating tsunami that usually follows. Right. Now, knowing what to do, people tend not to panic much because this has been somewhat of a routine for them to keep doing this.
That's right. Of course, they are still quite shocked by the strength of this earthquake, but thankfully, Jeff, no reports of any tsunamis yet. In fact, the authorities should be lifting the warning soon, which will bring with it a sigh of relief.
I bet so. Well, a major breakthrough in Syria as a ceasefire appears to be holding between the Syrian government and the rebel fighters. For Syria's largest city, Aleppo, it hasn't come soon enough. It was home to over 2.3 million people before the civil war broke out 5 years ago. For 3 years, rebels battled Syrian soldiers in the heart of Aleppo, and by the time the army had pushed the opposition out, the world had lost one of its greatest cultural jewels, the city's ancient market.
Interesting. Well, both sides in this bitter conflict have things in common. Easily seen as the destruction, which is terrible in both government-held areas as well as where the opposition holds its ground. The other things they share are exhaustion and misery throughout all of this.
In neighborhoods on the front line, tarps are used to shield residents from the eyes of snipers as families try to exist among the ruined city. Now, with infrastructures destroyed, there's no running water, no electricity for many people. And so many of the city's young working men have been lost in the fighting that families are reduced to actually taking charities to survive.
Sure. Well, while children are resilient and continue to play in the streets, the horrors of war are apparent as some of those children play with limbs that they've actually lost in these fighting and the shellings and the attacks that have been taking place. But many children can no longer play, having their lives stolen in this deadly war.
While there are some areas of Aleppo where people can still do errands and shop for food, the people are wary of more destruction if the ceasefire does not hold. Now, even though some are hoping for negotiations to end the bloody war, it is evident too much blood has already been spilled. With the Syrian army tightening its siege on the opposition-held side of Aleppo, many believe things still could get a lot worse before they get better. And Katan, the opposition knows that if they lose their position in Aleppo, then in essence, they've lost the war.
Well, essentially, there are no winners in this situation.
Great point.
But Aleppo is not the only city suffering in Syria. Activists in Homs, another rebel-held city, claim the Russians have dropped internationally banned cluster munitions. Now, these have reportedly killed or maimed many civilians.
And while the ceasefire was being called, tens of thousands of people were leaving Aleppo and its surrounding refugee camps heading for Turkey. Now, some 20,000 were reported to be stuck at the border crossing the Calais, with more on the way. Now, if the Syrian government forces launch a full-blooded assault to remove the rebels and militant Islamists in Aleppo, it's been estimated up to 1 million people could become refugees. And this is on top of all the other refugees that have already fled.
Yeah, it's a tremendous number and a tremendous burden that other countries must share. Turkey's president has accused the U.S. of creating a sea of blood. Well, more bloodshed in the news in the Middle East. President Erdogan vented his fury at Washington over its support for the Kurdish minority in Syria, a group that only Turkey considers to be terrorists.
Now, President Erdogan is quoted as saying, "Oh, America, I told you many times you either side with us or those terrorist organizations. You haven't had a good grasp on them, and that's why the region has turned into a sea of blood." Now, both Turkey and the U.S. are NATO members, but tensions have been building over multiple issues in recent days.
One such issue the United States is showing disapproval over with Turkey is how it handles its media. While the U.S. State Department might normally choose its words carefully as not to offend Turkey, this time the tone is different. The issue has come up due to Zaman Daily, which is Turkey's largest selling newspaper, and the main publication of Fiza Media Group, which is their parent company for that particular newspaper, being sharply criticized by the Erdogan government.
Now, a Turkish court appointed trustees to take over the management of the Fiza Media Group. John Kirby, a spokesman for the State Department, told RT, "We see this as the latest in a series of troubling judicial and law enforcement actions taken by the Turkish government, targeting media outlets and others critical of it. We call on the Turkish government to ensure full respect for due process and equal treatment under the law."
Kirby condemned the move, saying court-ordered supervision of a media's finances and operations should not prompt changes to the newsroom or editorial policy. "We don't think that these sorts of actions are in keeping with the healthy democratic values that are enshrined, again, in Turkey's own constitution. We don't think that they are keeping with that." So there's a little bit of issue over that freedom of speech that the media and all people should have, that's coming under fire.
While the U.S. still considers Turkey as an ally and partner on many issues, there is increasingly awkwardness over these major differences of opinion. Now, the U.S. has tried to downplay the differences as much as it can, but Erdogan's government is making that job difficult.
Now, of course, another issue on which Turkey is often mentioned is Syria. Now, Larry McGee has the latest for us on the airstrikes, which are ripping the ancient nation to shreds. Larry, what do you have for us?
The Syrian Air Force has released information confirming that it has bombed approximately 120 insurrectionist hubs located across the country. The strikes are reported to have struck over 440 targets, including the major city of Aleppo and several others. Boasted by Russia, Damascus is said to have hiked up its activities against mercenary positions within the past few weeks, gaining significant ground against rebels in several areas, including Aleppo. Extending its arm and support, warships from Moscow's Caspian Fleet are reported to have fired 18 cruise missiles at mercenary targets. Russian military officials say the missiles struck the 7 locations that were their intended targets in Raqqa, Idlib, and in provinces of Aleppo. Over 600 mercenaries are said to have been consumed in the strikes. Russia says its primary objective is to weaken the financial and economic foundations of ISIS. According to the Russian Military of Defense, the Syrian mercenaries have lost $1.5 million per day due to more than 12 oil storage and processing facilities and hundreds of fuel tankers being destroyed. Chiming in on the issue, Robert Naiman from Just Foreign Policy, when questioned concerning the perceived successes of the Russian military against insurgents and what that might indicate with regard to the sincerity of America and its partners, Mr. Naiman says that there are some who believe that Russia's intervention has placed pressure on the U.S. to step up its strikes. The policy chief says on the subject of the Syrian bombings and their effectiveness that up until now, American bombs have been a recruitment tool for rebel forces, and he doesn't suspect that the Russian airstrikes will produce anything either in terms of positive results. In fact, Mr. Naiman says we should be skeptical of any claim stating that something wonderful has been accomplished through bombing. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, you can definitely see Russia is still a very big key player in this war.
That's right.
Well, according to some human rights groups, a large part of Yemen's infrastructure has been destroyed as a result of Saudi Arabia's 11-month war against the country. Now, over 800 schools, 250 medical centers, along with hundreds of fuel depots, airports, docks, harbors, bridges, hundreds of roads and power plants have been targeted and destroyed.
That's right. The report also included that many tourist and historical sites, mosque, food warehouses, water reserve tanks, cell towers, and stadiums were also struck by the Saudi warplanes since March 2015. Now, the Saudi war has also left over 8,400 Yemenis people dead and nearly 350,000 houses demolished.
The attacks by Saudi Arabia continue as a recent attack on a Yemeni market in its northern province has left 40 people dead, along with dozens others injured. The fact that this was a public place is not unprecedented, as the Saudis frequently target public buildings, including mosques and markets, especially in the northern regions of Yemen. Now, these raids on the public gatherings has created a firestorm of anger among the Yemeni civilians, seeing that they're targeting, these areas where the people are gathering.
Yeah, where they go actually for their livelihood to take care of their families and so forth, I bet. One Yemeni man said, "It's a crime that has been committed by Saudi Arabians against Yemeni civilians in the market of Halaba, and Saudi rulers should be prosecuted in international courts, criminal courts, for such atrocities." And he says, "We witness that the UN in all of this is turning a blind eye to such crimes, which is against international human rights laws."
Another Yemeni man said, "Such attacks on popular markets, which is a destination for people with different affiliations and backgrounds, reveal the criminality of Saudi Arabia." Ahmed al-Maktufi, a political analyst, said Saudi Arabia targets markets to complete its systematic destruction of Yemen's economy, which is a part of its all-out war against Yemen, with 353 markets targeted in a bid to destroy the everyday life in Yemen, but so far it has failed to achieve its goals.
Well, as a result, people want international organizations to slam such indiscriminate actions as crimes against humanity.
The recent and ongoing missile deployment of U.S. missiles is being said to be in preparation for nuclear war against Russia and China. The South Korean government has been pressured by the U.S. to deploy missiles for the U.S. Now, this, of course, raises a red flag with Russia and China, as a country doesn't need high-altitude missiles to reach a target that's only 30 miles away, said Mike Billington, a political analyst.
He continued, "We're dealing with the overt preparation for nuclear war by the U.S. against Russia and China." And he's really emphasizing here, this analyst, that it's not just war, but nuclear war, right? The deployment of these missiles are aimed at China and Russia's far eastern territory and are coming with Ashton Carter's tripling of deployment of U.S. military forces in Europe on the border with Russia and the Baltic states, which also border Russia, which the Russians recognize as something, a strategy that the Germans actually used when they surrounded their borders during World War II before they invaded. So they're seeing this same thing start to play out with the United States.
Well, the U.S. is also in the process of deploying military bases in the Philippines, which creates a ring around China, which is a preparation by the U.S. and Britain's first strike policy to take out China's capacity to respond. Now, a policy which Billington says is insane and will never work, and which has brought the world to the brink of nuclear war.
I just read about that. Well, we closed out our broadcast with a review of a report that we brought to you several broadcasts ago by Katie Hopkins in an interview with RT. So many Syrians are being forced to flee their homes, as we just heard of some of the reports of the wars that are taking place, and they're taking their children with them to save them from the fighting. Well, some are making seemingly insensitive comments on social media in regards to that and the deaths that take place. UK's columnist Katie Hopkins made one such tweet that triggered an uproar online after she wrote, "Stand by for more pics of dead kids."
RT interviewed Miss Hopkins to find out just what she meant by that horrifying statement. She explained, "What I'm trying to say when I say stand by for more pics of dead kids really is that we see it now on a regular basis. Just today, actually, 27 individuals died trying to cross the Mediterranean. And I think really we've had a year of this now where we've done nothing. There is no solution," she said, "no solution being presented."
She's right. Well, it's getting pretty hard to deny the fact that the next step that the nations are going to take will bring the whole world into an all-out nuclear war. Yisrael Hawkins has shown for years that the prophecies show that these wars will certainly come to pass starting in and around the great river Euphrates, but also encompassing the whole world from there. Wars and destruction is mankind's only option unless he changes his ways and stops making choices that lead to suffering, diseases, and war. That way is the peaceful solution. Yisrael Hawkins and the House of Yahweh has been, is, and will continue to bring forth the only way to peace for all mankind as found in the laws given in your holy scriptures. To find out more about the only way to peace, along with the world's premier character education program, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you can contact the Peaceful Solution at www.peacefulsolution.org, and you can also contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. For any emails, you can send those to info@yahweh.com. And don't forget the greatest Bible study tool on the market today, the Yisrael Says program. You can find out about that by going to www.yisraelsays.com. And for any calls coming outside the United States, please call the number on your screen now.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, the teacher of peace who brings forth the laws of peace, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.